Got that? To you, Josh.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sarah. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for zooming in to this second community forum as part of this area-wide planning process led by Two Rivers. I'm Joshua Jerome, Director of Economic Development and the Zoning Administrator for the town of Randolph. Just want to thank Two Rivers and the EPA for being able to do this area-wide plan that was sort of came out of some of the environmental assessments that we did at the Branchwood parcel. This is the second community forum, and the first one from December had a lot of interesting conversations, and a lot of people made a lot of suggestions about what they envision as some of these catalyst sites around the downtown that we looked at. What we're going to see today is not what is necessarily going to happen at these catalyst sites. These are just based on suggestions that happened in December. And so really they are a launching point for us to be able to look at and to have additional conversations in the months to come on how these sites could be redeveloped. So they're here to help us be a little bit more creative in our conversations, and it includes a lot of the suggestions that we had in December. So I think everybody will find a little piece in there that they like, and we can build off from it. With that, I'd just like to turn it over to Sarah to introduce the Two River staff. So take it away, Sarah.
Thanks, Josh. Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Raitt. I work as a regional planner with Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission, and I'm here with my colleague, Kevin. Kevin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Kevin Geiger. I'm the Director of Planning at the Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission.
And as part of this project, we worked with VHB. They helped us out with most of the deliverables, and we did have a subcontractor as well for the market analyses, Doug Kennedy Advisors. But representing VHB here tonight is Mark. Mark, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Mark Hamlin. I'm Chief of Design for VHB Vermont.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all so that you can see some slides. Kevin, can you tell me whether that is now visible?
Yep, looks good.
Beautiful. Okay, just going to try to keep the participants going here as well. Great. So thank you all again for joining us. I'm going to run through very quickly the plan for this evening. We just did a little bit of introductions, and we're going to dive into some housekeeping in a minute here. The next sort of step after that is going to be a discussion of what we talked about at the December community meeting, as Josh alluded to. So we'll review that very briefly. And then we'll dive into the conceptual designs that VHB has produced for us. And we'll have some discussion around how those designs could be improved. And we'd love to get your feedback at that point in the discussion. And then we'll have some brief discussion of how designs sort of can get brought to life, how they come off the page and how we can actually implement them and make them reality. And so Kevin will be walking us through some of the typical kinds of resources that communities can draw on in order to realize these kinds of visions. And then we'll go ahead and close out. So we're expecting about an hour and a half of time this evening. So just some brief housekeeping. Please hold all of your questions and comments until after our presentations have concluded. That means the presentations of what we talked about in December, and then the presentations of the conceptual designs themselves, and then we'll be opening up the floor to you. If you would like to speak at that time, go ahead and raise your hand. There is a raise hand function, should be at the bottom of your screen, possibly under the reactions button. There also, please do remain muted if you're not speaking at the time. We'll call on you when it's time for you to unmute. And of course, everyone, please do treat each other with respect and courtesy. Okay, let's see here. So let's talk about how we've gotten to this point. So for those of you who were not able to join us for our first community meeting back in December, let's just briefly recap the road that we've taken to get to here this evening. This study began with identifying 17 parcels in the downtown that are either vacant or have very strong redevelopment potential due to their location and proximity to other resources. And you can see them outlined in red on this map. The town recognizes that these aren't the only important parcels in the downtown by any means, but they were a good point to start for a deeper dive conversation with the community about redevelopment possibilities. For ease of reference, VHB very helpfully grouped them into blocks. So we have here the North Block, the West Block, the Central Block, and then the East Block. And you'll notice that the East Block is entirely comprised of the Branchwood Site, and we're going to be talking about the Branchwood Site this evening. So here's the sort of overall arc of the study process that we followed so far. VHB started by conducting a desktop review of the environmental history and the conditions for the selected parcels, those 17 parcels that you saw outlined in red in the previous slide. And then we facilitated some VHB then did sort of housing and commercial market analyses for the broader downtown area. And then during that virtual community meeting back in December of last year, we presented the results of the desktop review and the market analyses, and we facilitated some community dialogue about development constraints and opportunities within each of the blocks. And we explained during that meeting that the plan was to develop some rough conceptual plans for the future layout of the Branchwood site, and then one other site as well, which had not yet been selected at that point in time. So following that meeting, VHB did the design work, and now we're gathering here this evening to take a look at the work that they've done just to discuss those designs further. During the December meeting, participants voted that the second site, the second catalyst site for conceptual design development, should be selected from the Central Block. And so just to refresh folks' memory, and for those who were not there, able to join us in December, this is a map of the Central Block. You can see that it has quite a number of parcels in it. And this is a brief overview of the discussion that the community had about the Central Block during that December meeting. As you can see, there were a number of desired future uses that were identified, quite a diversity of them. Following the meeting, town staff used the community input to select one parcel for conceptual design work, which we're going to be talking about this evening. And that's 17 South Main Street, which is currently vacant and is highlighted here on this slide. It's right above Atlantic Art, as you can see there. And we talked about that specific parcel actually during the December meeting. And this is what folks had to say about it. They noted that it's a bit unwelcome as an introduction to downtown to have a vacant site there. So there was real hope and desire for redevelopment to happen soon. There was talk about maybe incorporating art because it is something of a gateway to the downtown, and even perhaps temporary art while the sort of process of redevelopment was being undertaken. And then there was also this sort of comment about how the entire area could be regraded, and there was a vision to build back with a mixed use kind of development, so commercial space and then affordable housing on the upper floors. So responding to those comments, the town staff, for the purposes of the conceptual design work, posed a mixed use redevelopment with commercial at street level and rental apartments above, and the entire lot would be regraded. And then notably also the sidewalk access would be improved for that particular parcel. So this is the conceptual design that was presented, was developed and presented to us by VHB. Based on that feedback, this can be a little hard for folks to read. I recognize, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drop into the chat a Google Drive link so that you can go ahead and download this and zoom around to your heart's content. My apologies. All right. So in the chat, you should now have a Google Drive link that has a PDF of this particular file. And you can go ahead and download that so you can take a closer look at it. But I will be walking through it together on the screen here. So I'm just going to go back to the presentation. And as you can see here, there is sort of a plan for underground parking, a total of 29 spaces. And then the first floor would be a little over 7,000 square feet of commercial space, with the second floor being 12 units of apartments, mostly studio and 1 bedroom are envisioned here, with 1 2-bedroom unit as well. And then as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen here, on the right-hand side of the conceptual plan, VHB noted that if the lots to the north ever did become available, it might be nice to do an extension of that construction and that would accommodate another 11,000 square feet of commercial space and an extra 22 residential units. So that's an interesting possible future scenario to consider. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin to talk a little bit about some suggested modifications to this design, and then also to get your comments and feedback on this particular conceptual design. Kevin?
Thanks, Sarah. So in looking at this, we had a couple of ideas. We really liked, in general, the whole layout and the space, and it is an underutilized site. This could, when we're talking about housing, this could be a mix, what we call a mixed income housing. So it could be some affordable units and some market rate units. And in particular, one of the tweaks we came up with is that 2-bedroom unit, which is on the roadside, could be shifted to the back side. And so that back of that L on the left to your left in the screen, that could be a 2-bedroom unit on the second floor, and then another 2-bedroom unit on the third floor. They have pretty good views to the west over there and nice light. And so that was one of the little tweaks we did. The other thing is, since we have commercial space, and that commercial space could have a restaurant or whatever, and we're building a flat roof building, can we take use of the roof somehow? And so is there a possibility, for a roof garden or a roof outside space that would overlook the downtown? Because again, you have a pretty nice view of the downtown up there. And now I think we're all very appreciative of any commercial space where we can be outside. And so those were 2 possibilities we put in there. But now, since you're all here, though, we want to hear some of your thoughts. So I'm going to try to see everybody. And see if I can see. So I'm going to try to move around. And Sarah, if you can see anybody too.
Please do raise your hand. Oh, I see a hand from
I see a hand from Amy.
Amy.
So
Amy,
let's do Amy first.
Hi there.
Hey.
It's interesting you mentioned the rooftop garden, because in my work at the public library, I did some interviews or some conversations with a bunch of 10th graders at the high school last spring. And one of the ideas that came up from one of the students was we should have rooftop gardens so that we can raise food. Which, coming from a 10th grader or anybody, I thought was a pretty innovative idea.
That is good. Thank you. Any other comments from folks out there? I think I can see you all now. If you can, again, as Sarah said, you can go down, and under reactions, you can use the raise hand, which is the hand that looks like this, not the wavy hand. Or you can actually just wave your hand. I see Morgan.
Let me see. Am I unmuted?
Yes, I can hear you, Morgan. You're a little kind of muffled, but yep.
Yeah, I'm my name's Morgan.
Oh, your sound. Can you maybe get a little closer to the speaker or something? Your sound is a little muted still. Yes, that's better.
So my name is Morgan Easton, and I work for Catamount Solar. I also grew up in Randolph, and I went to VTC for architectural engineering technology and sustainable design. So I love this process that you guys are working through. I'm just curious as to why you consider two spaces for future like conception of development when they're established properties that are owned by folks?
Why we
curious.
why we considered looking at established properties?
Yeah, the potential future phase. I just feel like that's a little.
You mean on that expansion, not on this site that we're talking about, but that northern expansion L?
Yeah, the first part is a viable, definitely design, but I'm just wondering in this conceptual phase why we're even considering a future phase that takes over two properties that are viable dwellings currently.
Yep, that's a good question. I don't have any particular answer for that, but I don't know if Sarah or the team does. I think in general they just wanted to give that as a one more idea in terms of using that space at the downtown scale that we see more on Main Street.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's just such a broad discussion that it can be a slippery slope to throw that sort of thing in the mix as folks are really digesting a lot of different ideas. That is a tricky one. So.
Okay, thank you. And then John Kaplan.
Yeah, hi, thank you. My general reaction is I love the concept because it seems like a pretty efficient use of the space. And I just wonder about, and I am, unfamiliar with sort of how this can play out, in terms of getting this implemented. I'm sure it's complicated because, I'm not sure like who owns the property, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Who would be the developer? Of course, I jump right to a lot of those ideas. I'm wondering about like any thought to sort of an interim, something that could be kind of more like a quick build. Like I saw sculpture was on the list, or just something like I know there was like the pop-up, food truck that was there last year, which I thought was, it didn't do a lot from sort of like the attractiveness standpoint, but at least it was some activity and it wasn't just a bare piece of concrete as people were coming into the downtown. So just sort of curious about like an interim use of that space while the longer term, project that you just presented kind of works its way through the process, which I'm sure will be years.
Sure. So we'll talk about potential implementation at the end, but that's a good idea. I don't think we really had much raised in the earlier meeting about kind of interim or, during construction uses and things that could go on. So I think we can, Sarah, be capturing that over there. And again, as Sarah just noted in the chat, if you have things that you want us to consider, you can feel free to put them in that Google Doc. So now I see Jake.
Just kind of looking at the layout here, how is this going to affect, like storm drainage and, mass water kind of flowing in that area? Right now, it all kind of just flows down Main Street. Is the any kind of significant change to how the driveway is could potentially divert a pretty significant amount of water down behind that building and behind those first three properties, I guess, on Weston. So I guess I'm a little bit curious if that's something that's at all being considered in this.
Yeah, at that, again, we're at the very rough design scale. So there's no engineering and anything about that. The impervious surface is about the same. As you may notice, the ramp down to the underground garage is on the south side of the building. And obviously there'd need to be a drain that connects to the drain system down at the bottom of that ramp. Otherwise the water would just go into the parking garage.
I wonder if Mark has any comments in response to that question.
Yeah, usually in an urban situation like this, you have to use underground stormwater collection systems. They're like regular hard concrete things that are set in under the pavement. Then it's released slowly over time.
Mhm. Thank you. And I see Gary. Gary, you're on mute there. Gary, you're still on mute.
How about this? Can you
There
hear
you
me?
go. Yes.
I love the concept with the parking in the basement, the commercial on the first floor, and apartments on the second floor. How many apartments are you thinking about?
If I remember right, I think it's 12 per floor. Most of them being single bedroom or studios.
I think it's a fantastic idea. After the last meeting, I was thinking about anything that would help mobility, particular with seniors around town, and bike pass and bike pass and that as well. But we are in a crisis on housing right now, so I just love the idea.
Thank you. Now we do have Branchwood coming, which we're going to talk about, but any more things while we're over here at 17 South? I think I could see everybody here. Anything more, Sarah, or do you want us to go to the next?
We're getting some great comments in the Google document. Thank you, everybody. Please do make use of that resource and share your thoughts there. I don't see any particular questions in the Google Doc that need to be addressed right now.
Okay.
Okay, so last call on comments regarding 17 South Main Street.
I have another comment if I'm heard.
Sure.
Absolutely.
There's some other area along Railroad Street that is pretty run down, and it might be another area to consider for this type of a structure as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Sarah, you want to take us to Branchwood?
Absolutely. Okay. I can advance us here. All right, so let's move along then to talk about the Branchwood site. As many of you are already familiar, this site once hosted a wood products manufacturing facility. It burned back in 1999. The site was completely demolished, and it's been vacant ever since. The town now owns the property, and the only structure that remains from that original construction is the smokestack, which you can see in the aerial image on the right here. This obviously in the center is the street map, and then you can see a street view image as well on the lower left-hand corner of your screen. So here's a brief overview of the community input that was received about the Branchwood site during that community meeting that we had back in December of last year. We don't have time to recap all of the ideas that were discussed, but hopefully this gives a flavor of the conversation that we had, which was very rich. There was lots of emphasis on outdoor recreational space and all the diverse possibilities for that kind of development. And you can see some examples here. There was also sort of a lot of emphasis on housing as being obviously a need that the community is facing, but particularly beneficial on the southern part of the site. And there was talk about having that be a mixed income kind of development, including some small units, condos, and duplexes. As you can see here, there was also to talk about stormwater infrastructure, rain gardens, right? So green infrastructure there. There was a call to retain the historic smokestack as an important feature for the town. And there was talk about sort of creating event space, whether that was used for, the farmers market or food trucks or some other function, but creating space that was available to the community. Not every idea that was shared that evening could be incorporated into the conceptual design, obviously. So town staff made some selections and they were able to incorporate much of what was discussed. So I'm going to go ahead and show the design here, the conceptual design, but what I'm also going to do is just like I did for the 17 South Main Street, I'm going to drop the link into the chat so that you can go ahead and download the design for yourselves and take a closer look at it. There you go. So you should now have, oh, my apologies, I did not go to the correct person. Okay. Everybody should now have in the chat, excuse me, a link to a Google file, which is a PDF, a downloadable PDF of the conceptual design. And again, to remind everybody too that there's a link in the chat for written comments. If you'd like to submit written comments rather than speaking, we'll come to that in just a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and restart this share here so that everybody can see the full design. It is quite detailed as you can see. I'm going to walk everybody through the major components of it. We talk about the Branchwood site in sort of two parts, right? Because there's the northern portion of the site, which lies north of Pearl Street, and then there's the southern portion, which lies below Pearl Street. If we look at the northern portion, we see that it's roughly equally divided between outdoor recreational space, which is closer to Pleasant Street and therefore more accessible to the heart of the downtown. And then a commercial/innovation hub with residential units on upper floors. And then on the far eastern side here, you see some parking, which would serve the residential units on the north and south side of the property, as well as the users who were using the commercial space there as well, employees, etc. So the design for the northern portion includes nearly 7,500 square feet of commercial space and then 7 two-bedroom units. And as we discussed in the December meeting, there's a significant risk that those residential units on the northern portion of the property could not be built using HUD funding because of the noise impacts from the railroad. So, and then if we turn to the outdoor recreation area, really reflecting what was discussed in that December community meeting, you'll notice that the recreation area includes a mini skate park, a basketball hoop, and a bocce court. And then a walking path is envisioned encompassing the entirety of the northern portion of the site, which again really is a direct response to the needs that were expressed during that December community meeting. We also see in the northern portion that there's multiple stormwater retention ponds, a rain garden, and there's a note that sculpture art could be integrated throughout the northern part of the portion of the site as something to consider in the future. The parking lot has 25 spaces, important to note, and there's also sort of an indication here in the conceptual design that solar panels could be incorporated into the roofs of the commercial / business innovation center. And so with that, let me sort of turn to the southern portion of the site. And then after I walk us through that, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin and he'll talk about some ideas for modifying the property, or modifying the design rather. So the southern portion of the site is envisioned as being entirely residential. Again, taking advantage of the fact that it's outside of the railroad noise impact zone. So that's really an ideal place to put residential within this site, because you can access more federal funding to actually build that project. There's a first floor garage and then 2 more stories of 1 and 2 bedroom units for a total of 22 units there. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Kevin to talk about some potential modifications that he's noticed for this design, and then we'll open it up to community discussion. Take it away,
Okay,
Kevin.
thank you, Sarah. And if you can drive the cursor maybe as needed, if we'll start up in the far left corner of the lot, as you may have seen, yeah, way up even in the further left, there are 3 trees there along South Pleasant Street, and that's where the power line comes in. So the power line comes in right where Sarah is there, and right where her cursor is, there's a big pole, which you may have seen in that earlier image. And from that pole, we go across the street to the south side, and then we go back over right where she's done, and then we go along that edge there. So that's where the power line runs right now. And so we've suggested that you may want to, if the power lines stay in place during the construction, you would remove these trees. You could put in shrubs or low things around there, but you'd want to take out those trees. Otherwise, you're just always fighting against the power lines. The trees in front of the incubator commercial space, also, if we were doing solar on there, it'd be good not to have trees up there blocking any of that solar stuff out there. The other things, you could potentially bury power throughout there, but burying power is pretty expensive as you go. Another issue would be the more you spread out buildings, the more you increase the cost per square foot to construct them. And so if you can construct one solid building, that's easier and cheaper than 3. And so those 3 buildings, number 8 on the north side there, could potentially be 1 building instead of 3 buildings. And so that would be able to possibly bring some of those costs down there as well. There is, as I think maybe Jake noted earlier about the issue about stormwater on this site, it is not so impervious right now, although it is largely a gravel parking lot. And so there are many spots on this site where you can see stormwater ponds, detention ponds have been put in to take off that stormwater. On the south side where we have the housing, originally we were thinking maybe even 1 more story of housing there, but then you'd have a 4-story building. And when you're driving around town on Main Street and everything, is 3 stories. And so a 4-story building is possible, but you could actually, if you bring it down to 3 stories, you probably don't need the number of parking spaces underneath there. You probably don't need 38. And so again, there you could potentially be putting, like down at the far right side end, instead of that being parking garage, which is the parking garage levels in your upper right-hand corner of your screen, you could actually do some at-grade residential units. And so you could up the number of housing units there and decrease the number of parking spaces. The other issue, Sarah has a red T there right now. We were thinking of adding a transit stop. I was just at the Sharon Park and Ride today, and the transit bus, comes down and it pulls into that park and ride, and then it backs up and kind of goes back and forth to get back out of that park and ride. And so one of the things we thought is if we put a transit stop where that T is, then it can make a left-hand turn, loop through that parking lot and come back out onto the main road. We only really need to lose about 1 parking space to do that on the north side. And it's much easier than having a transit bus kind of try to back up and move around, that type of thing. And this would give us good access down there. You would have transit both for the working part of the site as well as for the residential part of the site, and anybody else along that area could be using that transit stop. So those were some of the things that we came up with down there. And now I think we're going to open it up to you all again.
Just a reminder that there is a Google Doc that some of you are using. Thank you so much. And I've dropped the link into the chat again. So please do take advantage of that and leave written comments for us there.
Okay, and I see Morgan's hand.
Yeah, I really like this concept for this space, and I remember being a kid watching this building burn down, so this is really cool. And also, I was wondering if you were incorporating ideas of bike transit opportunities of like a city bike type of area that would give an opportunity for that sort of thing?
We had not yet. And I think you're the first one to mention that particular idea, so that's good.
Actually, by the number 12 on the larger residential building, there's a covered bike storage shown on the outside of that.
Aha.
Oh, that's
so that-
awesome. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't notice that. That's that little long gray rectangle. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah. And then like, I don't know, just tossing into the crock pot of costs is like establishing a city bike borrowing area, like to see that you can, pay a fee online and have access to the bikes when you get into town if this were to be a transit center as well. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Thanks for bringing that up, Morgan, because I hadn't noticed that bike storage. Amy.
Hello again. I have, I guess, two observations, and I want to start the first one by saying I don't garden, but I do think it might be interesting to be able to include space for residents to have garden plots here. The other idea I have is if it turns out that residential units cannot go in that northern portion of construction, then I will point out that even before the Boys and Girls Club closed in Randolph, there has been a great desire for, and I certainly heard it a lot last year when I talked to people about what do youth need in our community, for a community center / a youth center.
Mhm.
I think that this would be a fantastic opportunity to create space that serves our youth from birth until, high school and beyond, really a teen center, an early childhood center, support for homeschooling families. So it's not that I don't think housing is important, but I think supporting our youth and providing them with places where they can develop and grow is super important as well.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, due to the issues, the brownfield issues on this site, we would probably not advise gardening unless some soil was removed down there to put it back in. Other things on this site. I see a hand, literally a hand from Stephanie, old school. That's great.
Yeah, I don't know how to use Zoom.
Me neither so much, so I just do this.
Hi, I'm owner of Third Branch Pottery. I'm gonna be moving over to the former Bell's Mains building sometime this summer. My comment would be with the housing is I have 3 young children and we just bought a house, but before that we could not find any housing, and everything you're talking about would not serve most families. A 2-bedroom would be impossible unless you have 1 child or 2 that could share a room. And so I think kind of considering having larger units might be really beneficial.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, most of the stuff that we see out there in terms of real estate kind of studies shows that we're really short on the 1 and 2 bedrooms a lot, but certainly some 3 bedrooms. This unit compared to the 17 South Main has more 2-bedroom units. Jean, I see your hand, and then I see Gary's hand. So let's go to Jean Bianco.
Hello, everybody.
Yes.
I love the concept. I just noticed that there's a lack of parking in downtown Randolph. And is there a way to maybe moving the parking closer to taking 10 and moving it to 3? I don't know what that would entail, but it's a thought.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I don't know if there's any particular logistical reason why the parking would be on one end versus the other.
No, the one thing we were just trying to do is line the driveways up with each other and create a 4-way intersection.
Yeah,
But
okay.
a good switch.
And so I'm going to go to Gary Durr and then Julia Flynn. Gary, you got to mute.
unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
I mentioned this site at the last meeting, which is at the corner of Pleasant Street and Randolph Street. There's an area there next to Catamount Solar that Morgan actually worked on a whole bunch of designs for a little park area. And I know there's some seniors in the Red Lion Inn or whatever who desperately would just like to have a nearby space where they can go outside.
Mhm.
Another thought is on the 3 and 4 bedroom. I really, really encourage you to get more 3 and even consider 4, because I'm involved with a number of organizations that need housing that really enables 3 and 4 member families.
Okay, thank you. And so I'm going to Julie next, who's intimately involved with housing. Julie.
I'm trying to figure out how to unmute here. Thank you. I guess I'd be interested in hearing what some of the family folks like Stephanie think, but it occurs to me on both of these, it just seems like the site is really tight on the housing side, and that people who live there, even if recreation is not far away, who might have kids or animals or something, people want to, like, I don't know, like have a barbecue outside, or, have just be outside near their home, and there's really no place for that on these. And also just from cost considerations, I'm just wondering if Mark has estimates on parking garage kind of structures. I know they have been done in the Burlington area, particularly on for larger unit buildings, but that's a pretty steep cost to inject in a project of this size. I wonder if there's any numbers on that. But generally, I gotta say, it's really, really nice to see these concepts, because I think this is great for start.
The way these are laid out, they're open air, so you're not paying for mechanical venting.
I see. Okay.
And they're just almost like they're made to be 2 bays wide, just like the parking across the street.
Yep. So you're basically, it's just a concrete foundation basically and some bunker walls. Yeah. Instead of a real parking garage.
And you'd have, like, slats to screen it and things like that. Yeah. Versus going down and.
Okay, good. Thanks. Because we can't see the elevation, so that's helpful. And what about the scaling? Have you the massing? Have you thought about that? Because you've got these residential in both cases, and then the other one, it's even lower. It's not that great. It's actually a story probably lower than the site. Have you thought about neighbor impacts to this?
Yeah, this one started a floor higher, and then it was brought down 1 floor just for that reason. So it's a 3-story.
All right, thanks so much. This is great. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, from an aesthetic perspective, we were thinking the land slopes up behind that southern parcel, so it kind of would be tucked against that slope a little bit. John Kaplan and then Jake.
Yeah, thanks. So again, I think I love the concept in general. One thing I wondered about, and I remember I went to the last meeting, and I know there was some, I think, analysis. I wonder, when I see the commercial/innovation hub, I don't know, I just have a really hard time picturing, like, is there really a demand for that? And I know that's kind of a question to be answered down the road. So just sort of putting that out there as a question. I don't think it's bad to have that space, and I like that it, again, has the residential on top. And I guess and just to kind of put a counter argument about the parking, I like the fact that the parking is away from South Pleasant Street. Partly because I think the focus should be on having the activities, like in this case, it's the recreation activities in clear view. You know, it just, activity on the street makes a street seem alive and adds to sort of the placemaking aspect. A bunch of cars sitting there does not do that. So I am a strong proponent of keeping the parking, you know, out of sight. I love it under the building where you don't really see it very much. And so anyway, yeah, those are my initial thoughts. And I do like the idea of kind of some additional outdoor green space that's just sort of public for the residents or gardens or both. So I echo those comments.
Thank you. And we would, this diagram is hard to see, but the intent would be to have a sidewalk extend at least along the north side of the road there. Jake was next, I think. And then we'll come back to you, Gary, there. Jake, did you have a comment?
Yeah. So would the buildings be flat roof style at this site here?
Yes. Yeah.
Would there be any possibility of either common areas on the roof or potentially rooftop gardens at on either of these buildings here? Well, I guess any of them, whether it's, you know, 3 in the number 8 there or a single or.
You certainly could do it. I had been thinking kind of potentially quasi-commercial, you know, like a outdoor restaurant space over on 17 South here. 13 could have rooftop garden access. They were thinking about more solar rooftop on the commercial industrial space over there in 8. And Gary.
I hadn't thought about that solar, but you know, with the Energy Committee certainly supports more solar on as many rooftops as possible. We also really want to get them on existing downtown buildings as well, which would make room for if that is successful for the new buildings having gardens on it. The other thought, and I had the same thought John Kaplan had, you know, on a need for commercial. Actually, we've lost a couple commercial businesses recently, but we have to be forward thinking. When we get more residential in there, it's going to drive the demand for more commercial. So we just have to be aware that the residential starts and then we follow up with the commercial.
Thanks. Any more comments on this particular design and possible permutations? And as Josh started us out saying, you know, these give us a step forward, but this is not the end by any stretch. Jake, I see your hand again. And then let's go to Jean after Jake. Did you?
Yeah, so I know it was briefly mentioned before, just that moving power underground is typically cost prohibitively expensive. Are there any kind of concrete figures for what the actual cost would be to do that along this stretch? You know, I mean, as you know, the effects of climate change only get worse and worse. Our above ground exposed lines are only going to get harder and more expensive to maintain. So, I mean, just thinking, you know, 10, 20, 30 years down the road, if the lines are ever going to be buried, now would be the time to do it. You know, because the costs are only going to go up.
And you can save some cost just because you're in the midst of construction and you're digging down. But typically you're talking about a 10-fold increase compared to above ground lines. So I think Sarah's, are you wanting us to move on soon, Sarah? Is that what, or are we good?
No, I was wondering if you wanted to make some space for folks from the town to say anything, particularly about the Innovation Center. Have any comments?
Yeah, I was going to kind of roll that into the implementation part of life. I do see Jean's hand, and then let's go to the implementation stuff.
Yeah, I was
and Pat.
I was kind of agreeing with whoever said about the the parking lot. I know it's kind of an eyesore to see parking lots. But maybe there could be like, maybe you could divide it in half and do half in the back and half in the front, and then you would kind of, if you could blend it in. But, you know, I don't know if it's cost prohibitive to do two instead of one, or if you could rearrange it a little bit so it wouldn't look like, you know, a concrete slab there or just cars. I totally agree with whoever came up with that, but I was just thinking about convenience for downtown and, you know, just added parking, but.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Pat French.
Yeah, I wondered what people thought about the possibility of having elderly housing on the southern part. We're hurting in the elderly housing category just as much as other categories.
Okay.
And this is walkable to the town village.
Yeah, and one of the items that you'll note in part of that design is that kind of loop walk over there. And that is a critical thing for elderly, is just to have a safe, flat spot that they can walk. Doesn't have to be big. And, you know, has some activity, something to look at while you're going around, accessible, near other people, ability to be lighted, and near your housing. So you can go back and forth. Thank you.
I was curious what other people think about that too.
That could be a senior housing in particular.
Would people, or were they thinking elderly housing or just regular housing or some combination of the two?
It could easily be some combination of the two. It could be elderly that we have, there's no, you know, developer in the pipe right now. If it was elderly, then you'd probably be talking the 1 and 2 bedroom units. But it could be mixed as well. There's a lot of stuff that says, you know, it's nice to have a mix of ages in housing. Okay. I think, Sarah, let's see, we've got about 5-10 minutes left here, right? By my watch, or no, we have a more like a half an hour left.
We can continue, yeah, if folks
Okay.
have more comments.
Yeah.
We can go for another 10-15 minutes or so.
Okay. Again, you know, we did that earlier conceptual, you know, kind of brainstorm list of a bunch of things out here. But a couple people have thought of additional things out here. This does, this site does lend itself to John Kaplan's earlier comment about potential either interim use while you're building the pieces. There's a lot of flat space out there on this site, as well as once you've built it, you know, you've got that a parking lot over there, those 25 spaces on the north side. So there's nothing that says you can't turn that into, you know, a farmer's market or you know, a food truck thing part of the time. So Julia, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just the underground utility thing, I think our zoning bylaws require new construction to have underground utilities. It doesn't necessarily mean that you bring the road utilities underground, but I think it may require or strongly suggest or whatever that all new construction has utilities underground.
So that if you're coming off of the road, you know, into a site, you mean?
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you have to do the whole road infrastructure over, but there might be an opportunity if the town were also interested in doing that at that corner, that it could be a combined effort or something.
Good, that's good to know. Other comments? Okay, that's fine. Oh, I see Gary again. I see your hand, Gary. Oh, mute, Gary. You're on mute. Hang on. Gary, did you want to talk?
Mute.
There you go.
Okay. I think we need another meeting on this, actually. All this discussion was really, really good. And so I think we need another round.
Yeah, and that's certainly, possible. This is not like, now we're putting the final stamp on this thing. It is for this part of the process, because we do have to end it at some point with our workload and our particular funding and project on this. But I'm sure there's more to come as you take this and work it towards whatever will be out there in the future. So I see Amy and Sam.
I would love to hear from Josh about the Innovation Center, because what comes to mind for me is if you have a sweet tricked out maker space, wouldn't that be a cool complement to a youth center, especially for teens?
Yeah, I was going to cover that some under implementation, but do you want to hit that some now, Josh?
Yeah, I can touch on that, and I guess I would just make a general comment. Commercial / innovation, like they're buildings. Any sort of commercial activity could be in there, and it could be a community center too. So we don't know what it is. It's a structure. So we know that housing and accessing HUD funding is really complicated in that site on the northern end. So commercial activity, community space, could be anything. Innovation hub could be a maker space. It could be a digital economy sort of focused space. We are trying to develop that sector in this region. I think there's a lot of different opportunities for that space to be really creative as opportunities arise in the marketplace.
Thanks. Sam.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep, Sam Hooper. I have a business on Pearl Street, and this is all great. Really excited about this. Wondering what your thinking is around maybe you touched on this earlier, but around timeline, like if this concept were to fully go through, or even a different variation of it, is this a 10-year project? Is it in a couple phases? Just trying to get a pulse on that with regard to everything, all the supply chain mess up and cost of goods sold and contractors and all that. So
yeah, that's kind of a little far in the future, but I can tell you from the Brownfields side of life, once a redevelopment plan was settled on, then there would need to be additional testing, because we have various information, but the state, and Christy may want to jump in on this, but the state has said that as we go down to foundation level, if we're talking, going down several feet, we're probably going to need to do additional testing in those particular spots around the soil as well. And, you're going to have to remove some soil from the site off the surface, and how much soil and where you're going to put those are going to be concerns once we know something. But I would bet that there's, probably a construction season's worth of testing and moving things around there before you could then actually do construction. During that time, you can do your engineering and permitting and all that, but you couldn't, this is not a greenfield where you could just say, okay, we're going to go to construction right away, even if you had a plan right away. I don't know, Christy, did you have anything more there? I know.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So I'm Christy Herzer. I am the project manager for the Branchwood Site from the State of Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. And so for Brownfields projects, I love to pull in, I attribute it to you, Kevin. I don't know if you originated this phrase, but Brownfields are, real estate transaction with, oh, now I'm gonna mess it up with a contaminant twist.
With spicy, I use the term spicy soils sometimes.
Spicy soils. Ooh, I like that. Well, this site does have spicy soils. So we deal with these projects quite often, and we know there's some soil contamination, so we need to know more about it, and especially once the redevelopment plan is finalized, then that will help guide how we will manage the contaminated soils and what can be done with them. So you know, I like to set expectations very reasonably for Brownfields projects because it is not, you know, necessarily a quick thing. So we've already got a jump on this project as far as what we know is out there. We do need to do some supplemental work before we can get to what we call the corrective action part of the process. So yeah, definitely a couple years is reasonable for you know, thinking about brownfields redevelopment. 10 years, that's, you know, very long. Like, you know, I would hope that this would get done before 10 years is up. But, you know, I would say a couple years just to be on the safe side.
Thanks. Morgan, I see your hand.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
So yes, just to build on what Gary kind of suggested, I think it would be great if there was a space on the town website that some of this conceptual process could be documented and available for folks, so you can just keep folks up to date and not have to backpedal in some of our conversations. I think it would be really productive to have these slides and, you know, the notes and discussions, and then also just as a nostalgic multiple generation Randolph resident, I wasn't sure if there was any way to incorporate the Branchwood. I know it'd be difficult with all the site work that needs to be done to preserve that chimney stack, because of the Randolph history that kind of carries, and kind of a landmark in the town. But I know that could be a difficult feat with all the digging you have to do there.
That's
anyway,
actually shown where the number 7 is.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I missed it. That's awesome. Wow, I really appreciate that. That's awesome. Sweet. Well then, yeah, thank you all. This is a great concept, and I really appreciate all the thought that's gone into all of this. But yeah, I think it'll be really effective for the next conversation moving forward, and then to continue to draw feedback, like Gary said, might be helpful as we keep digesting possibilities there.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we don't take this stuff and like lock it away on a file after this. We get, this is the beauties of public projects like this is it all is a public document. We'll give it to Josh at the end. So Amy.
In terms of making this available to the public, I'm happy to offer up Kimball Library as a place where you can put this stuff out for people to come and look at, not in a digital format. So please do keep that in mind as a public place that's open 6 days a week, and evenings and Saturdays, that it might provide a lot of opportunities for community members to interact with and know about this process in a way that they might otherwise not.
Great, thank you for that offer. My wife's the town librarian, so I'm partial to libraries. So I'm gonna call on Erica. I see Erica here from our GMEDC, our Regional Development Corporation, and see if she has any comments, because we've had some comments about the need for commercial and makerspace and stuff like that.
Thanks, Kevin. This is great. It's so exciting to see this, and I really appreciate Morgan's comment about the smokestack. Josh and another resident, Dan DeVoe, and I were doing a walkthrough actually after your first community meeting to just check out the site a little bit more deeply, having heard what the community had to share. And the smokestack is definitely a keeper. I mean, and one of the things that I like about this is how, if we think back to the Industrial Revolution, that was an innovation leap. And so the fact that that smokestack is kind of central to this innovation / commercial space, I think is really, well, it's cool, but it's also, having been a part of this team with Josh and Dan DeVoe and a lot of different community residents, we are actually in the process of looking at developing an innovation hub in the Randolph area. And one of the focal points is the Advanced Manufacturing Center at VTC. And I was actually on a call earlier today about the role that advanced manufacturing people are seeing it play, not just in this region, but nationally due to the workforce situation going forward. And so having both a commercial and innovation kind of bent on some space in a downtown region will be very important as we look at developing tech-enabled businesses that will be workforce drivers going forward. And VTC is a leader nationally in return on investment for technical education. And Randolph, people who get their education and have opportunities close to where they're getting their education tend to stay. So this is kind of, if you think about this space as a step in the direction of growing a larger company, you've got the technical training. You might have a space where a new business can start and then grow. And with the kind of industrial heritage that the broader Randolph area offers, this just seems, I'm just really excited to see this. So I don't know if there are any questions out there that answers or if that's even helpful, but thank you. I'm excited from the GMEDC perspective to be a part of this conversation going forward and seeing how we can make the next 2 years go faster.
Oh, great. And I do know that there have been kind of efforts before to try to link VTC up on the hill with the downtown, through a variety of ways, but to get those students down in the community.
Yeah, it might be the next step, like a VTC incubator in downtown. There are a lot of just cool marketing optics in terms of being adjacent to a railroad, which was the driver for the earlier industrial revolution. But there's also just a lot of just facility of being in a downtown area where things are happening and things are available. And it would get more of the VTC crew that's up on the hill down into town.
Great, thank you. And I think we'll come back to you, Erica, when we were talking about implementation too. So Jake.
Yeah, so this might be a little early to be considering something like this, but would snow removal at both of these sites, so this South Pleasant Street and also South Main, would that be handled by the town road crew, or is that something that would have to be outsourced? I mean, just looking at the layout right here in particular, there's a lot of kind of tight, small areas that you wouldn't really be able to get a tractor, or wouldn't really be practical to use a truck or anything like that. It would require a pretty small piece of equipment to effectively do that. So I just wanted to ask if that's something that's been considered here.
I'll jump in a little bit on the 17 South Main Street. That could be entirely, a private developer doing that. On this site, I think because the town owns it, the town has a lot more opportunities to have town specific or town controlled pieces there. I don't think there's intention that the housing on the south side would necessarily be owned or operated by the town. But perhaps some of the north side there, and Mark can jump in on the parking lot, but that's pretty much a conventional parking lot on the north side.
Yeah, and there's quite near the number 1 that's actually stormwater. Snow could be pushed in that direction.
Down the end there on the east end. Thanks. Josh, did you have any issue on potential town operations on the site? I don't know. I mean, it's relatively early on that, but
yeah, I think it's pretty early. I mean, I don't. Yeah, I don't know what I would be able to contribute. I think Trevor might have a better understanding of what kind of resources from the town, but I I hadn't really envisioned this as being town owned. I kind of figured that a developer would eventually come into the mix, and that they would own it, and they would be taking care of that.
Thanks. So now, Sarah, is now maybe a good time to be going over the implementation and then wrap up?
Yeah, I wonder if before we move into implementation, I wonder whether Mark has any additional comments that came to mind for him as he worked so so closely on these designs with the PHB team.
Thanks.
Not exactly. I kind of like the way this north side here laid out. You know, I think the maker space with the ability to live above your shops or your art studios is pretty exciting. We're seeing a lot more of that in Burlington being very desirable space. I like how the circular walk, you know, for seniors or people that works into this. I added a lot of benches around the mini skate and the basketball and the bocce just so people could sit and watch things going on.
Mhm.
And the lower pond way to the left near church and South Pleasant Street there, we saw that as almost being a garden-esque kind of spot. Some of the stormwater places we've done in South Burlington are becoming so popular with outdoor sculpture and stuff. People are having their wedding photos taken at them. So that's kind of an interesting take on things.
Great. Okay. So Sarah, did you have a slide for the next thing? Oh, okay. So there's so much, it hardly even fits on the page. So I'm going to talk about this and a little bit. And so this part here is implementation. And so these are possible resources. They're not, ready-made. Josh just has to go over and open the box and out they come. But these are ways in which people do housing development. So they're federal and state tax credits that developers can use on these sites. There's, of course, private debt. There's the State Housing and Conservation Board, which has received a lot of money in the last couple of years for funds to do. There's the Community Development Block Program, VCDP, which has been used before to kind of do the next phase, potentially, what we call a planning grant there, where you'd kind of do pre-construction engineering. So you'd take this and move it one step closer out there and actually get ready. Not, you wouldn't have final designs, but you'd have a lot closer idea. There's partner equity stuff. There's National Housing Trust funds. There's new market tax credits. You name it. All sorts of things out there for potential funding for housing. Most of that housing is low and moderate income housing. And I hesitate to use the term affordable housing because that sometimes makes certain images pop up in people's minds, but it's the housing for you and me and Sarah and stuff like that, because a lot of us would qualify for what we're thinking about in terms of housing affordability stuff out there. And seniors, obviously our seniors all need a place to live. We don't want them to leave our communities with all their wisdom that they have gotten, all their stories. And so they deserve to be able to stay in town in a place that's age appropriate and friendly for them, because that we don't want them unsafe out there. So there's a lot of housing out there, but there's a bunch of stuff being done around mixed housing. So you kind of mix in affordable housing and some market rate housing, you mix age groups. So it's not just one monotone type of housing in any particular spot. And again, probably wouldn't be the town doing it. Some of these funds, the town has to be the applicant for or sponsor, but other ones, basically the town might be a step back and really, in this case, because of the ownership along Branchwood, really say, this is what we want, developers, you guys, people come in with proposals and give us proposals for this particular thing, both for the commercial and for the housing side. There are some avenues for commercial or makerspace funding out there, but I can't see people right now. I don't know why. Let me see if I can move this so I can actually see. Now I can see people. But so there may be some, either Josh or Erica or Julie perhaps even have other comments about possible funding out there for commercial space, makerspace, or housing development.
Well,
And so
it's-
Erica,
oh, sorry.
I see Erica.
Julie, do you want to go ahead? I thought I heard your voice.
Yeah, sorry, I was,
good.
I didn't know, I forgot my raise hand thing. Thanks, Erica. I was just gonna mention that it seems that the era of the earmark is potentially back.
On us.
EDA funds and congressional directed spending, whatever you want to call it. And also some, clearly some focus on, broadband and housing and other things that are coming down the pike in the next, several years. So there's more to come. And I think, the trick sometimes, and to somebody else's comment about when, I think, the trick here is that mixing these fundings can be kind of tricky. And I think you need to prioritize a site and, to really make headway, because these are, even though it seems like there's boatloads of money coming down the pike, there is, but there's also a lot of competition for it. And you have limited, I think somebody said before, there just aren't the contractors go around right now, even if you wanted and could develop them all at the same time, or the materials. So if this is the site that you want to develop the next, 5 years or whatever, 4 years, 3 years, then I think, a team to like really make that happen and figure out how those things all work together might be a great way to proceed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Erica?
Sure. That's a really good point. And for a lot of folks on the call looking at this list, I know before I kind of started in what I'm doing, this would be like, are you kidding me? How do all of these people come together to make one thing happen? And I kind of think it might be helpful to know that there are a couple of other models. I'm just going to name a couple of them. I know there are more in the state, but the Putney Block down in Bennington has an incredible capital stack. The Brooks House in Brattleboro, another one, that it's not unusual to have 10 different funders, including individual donations in some cases. I know that's what happened at the Putney Block, to make something like this happen. So it shouldn't be scary. It's kind of the norm. It looks horrifying, but it actually can happen. And so if there's interest in learning more about those models to think about how they might apply in this case, I'm happy to provide connections to my RDC colleagues and the RPC colleagues also, because it doesn't happen on one side or the other. It's everybody at the table. So for those particular projects. But another interesting possibility that kind of is a amalgamation of all of these things is the Evernorth Partnership, which people might not know about because it's relatively new. And that's a partnership between Housing Vermont and the Northern New England Housing Investment Fund. I have to read that because there are just too many names. But they are very interested in this kind of mixed use development that brings different populations together, different purposes together, and addresses different challenges. I mean, brownfields are a challenge to redevelop. So something like this has a lot going for it, but it can be challenging. And work live, that whole idea where you might live under your shop, which not a couple hundred years ago was also a common thing, is something that's coming back with some of the younger generations. And there's much more demand for that. So this is kind of a little bit progressive here, but I think it's something that as the demographics change in the state, we might see more demand for. And finally, affordable housing. The capital A affordable housing is kind of gone now. especially in our area, because we're talking about affordable for anyone pretty much. And that's important to remember because a lot of times projects can be pretty much scrambled if they get that affordable designation. And it's a lowercase a that enhances a lot of lifestyles for a large percentage of our population. And that can make a difference. So yeah, I'm happy to talk to anyone who's freaked out by this list. Like I said, the first time I saw something like this, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. How do you make all of those people work together? But it does happen. The objective is the important thing, and then you can align behind it.
Thank you. Morgan, I see your hand up, and then Julie's hand, but Morgan.
Yeah, I keep hearing this whole maker space, innovation space, whatever. That's a very pointed idea, and I kind of feel like it would be helpful to change the language to a community space as we're kind of exploring ideas, because echoing what Erica said, I went to VTC, and that is, we have a maker space there, and we really should, as a community, make better ties up there and utilize the resources that already exist instead of reinvent the wheel. So I just suggesting that we maybe couch that a little differently as we move forward, just to also keep people engaged without feeling like that's already established as what that space is going to be. I think that can evolve as this concept develops.
Yeah, kind of a loose, what we sometimes call a loose fit space.
Yeah, community space. That can be taken in a lot of directions, and we'll find that need when this develops in 5-10 years. But right now, to say, and yeah, just to echo Erica, I loved all her comments about VTC and everything it has to offer, and just gaining a better relationship there to utilize those resources for the needs of innovation spaces. That's a great opportunity there. So
Thanks. So I'm going to come back to you, Julie.
It did not click, sorry.
There you go.
Just wanted to second what, Eric was saying, that, just as an example, I think, our little Randolph House project there has probably 7 or 8 of these funding sources, and it's just typical to mix and match this way, and necessary, because no one of these funding sources is ever going to fund something this big. So it's really important. I wondered, Erica, do you know, I don't think New Markets works here unless, it's a special, like, I think there are some special sort of outlier things, but I don't think we're in the New Markets region. Do you know, Kevin, or anybody, Sarah? So that one might have to come off our list, but the downtown tax credits, things like that, are also available. So be good to know that. I don't know, we can ask Evernorth. Also, Evernorth, not used to that name because they were called Housing Vermont, but they've been involved in many partnerships with local housing organizations over the years, and they continue to grow and actually run that New Markets tax credit program. So yeah, they're a great resource to bring in when you need extra help.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, this Erica used the term stack, a funding stack, which took me a long time to actually figure out what that meant. And it's literally a stack. And think of all the different kinds of money stacked on top of each other to get where you need to go. And I know over in the Hanover area, some of the private folks are looking at it because, they say, oh, we need housing for our employees, and the hospital as well. We have the hospital just up the hill from this project.
Yeah, that's an opportunity here too, is looking at how it might look different, obviously, than the Upper Valley, but something that we have been approached by the employers. So that's kind of an impressive step.
So I think we're coming up close on time here, so we should probably wrap up.
Yes, sure,
Great.
Sarah. So that's up to you, I think.
Go ahead and stop sharing here. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. I'm going to hand it over to Josh just a minute here to close us out. I do want to say that all of the deliverables from this study are going to be packaged up, provided to the town, and the town will make them publicly available via the website. And those deliverables include, as I mentioned earlier, the environmental desktop review, the housing and commercial market analyses, the conceptual designs, which we looked at together this evening, and then also all of the notes from these 2 public meetings that we've had. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Josh.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, just to reiterate, we'll get all the material, make available on our website. And I like Amy's suggestion about printing out these conceptual designs and having them at the library. I think that would be another great way to get some feedback from the community. Maybe some suggestion box or a series of events over there. But yeah, so I think there's a number of people I see here that didn't participate in December's meeting, so that's really great. I think we have a good sample of individuals in the community giving us some feedback. So like I said in the beginning, this is just the beginning. We will have additional conversations as we look to drill down on these conceptual designs, and certainly have a time frame of a goal, 3 to 5 years on developing this site. So future conversations to have. Thank you everybody for participating, and have a wonderful evening. Good night.
Thank you all.